Hello and welcome to your monthly Fun Skills webinar. This is our fourth webinar and this month our focus is on English. As usual, you are welcome to ask questions throughout. We may not be able to answer them live, but we can add them to our FAQ that we are developing. So if we go on to our next slide. So I'm going to introduce the team. There are only two of us today and we will be doing sort of audio about going on to the next slide because Paul and I are at different locations. So Amanda Kelly, our industry manager, isn't joining us today. She's busy talking about fun skills elsewhere. So we have Paul. Paul's online. Can you say hello, Paul?
I am, yes. Hello from Dublin this afternoon. I'm, as I said, we're in different locations. We're actually on different land masses today, but we're hopefully the technology will work. It's worked so far, so we'll see how we get on.
Yeah, fingers crossed. We should be okay. And I'm Catherine Cooper. I'm one of the technical advisors as well for City and Girls Maths and English. So if we commence and look at our next slide. So if you are new to our webinars, just to reiterate, you can access our previous recordings on our Functional Skills Updates page. You can also access any documents there as well that we have previously developed, which include our readiness guide, which is more of a self-assessment document to help you prepare for the new functional skills reform. And also from last month is our maths mapping document. This helps you to look at the changes in the functional skills maths. So I'm now going to hand you over to Paul.
Thank you. And really a big announcement, really. And I think we finalised the details of this literally in the last few days. I think we may have touched on this last month, but we have next month we've filled the gap that we were otherwise had left of not having a webinar in December. There now will be a special Fun Skills 2019 webinar, an actual special session that's going to focus specifically on phonics. Very fortunate to have Claire Collins, who's been working with the ETF and with the Institute of Education on the piece of phonics research that they were asked to carry out, and from that the phonics toolkit and CPD program that they've been working to develop. So Claire's kindly joining us to sort of do a special sort of session and run through from that next month. Only thing to say, and we'll mention this again later on, is that this is obviously a date to put in your diaries. It is separate from this regular run of events, so you will have to sign up for it separately, but we'll include the details for doing that towards the end. But please put the 11th of December in the diary. I know lots of people will already be looking at that day because of the big Brexit vote in Parliament that day, but it'll be another big day for us as well because of this session. Other news at the moment, I think we mentioned this last month, but just to obviously reiterate that we are still in the process of working with Ofqual to sort of finalise our proposals and our plans for the reformed functional skills qualifications. That's a toing and froing process, and it's continuing to sort of run its course. We're hopeful, and certainly the informal feedback that we've had so far has all been sort of positive. So we're obviously hoping that will come to a conclusion as soon as possible. Just to roll on to the next slide, I'll do the usual running a couple of polls. Actually, 4 polls we're going to run for you this time, but I'll start with the usual one, which is just simply whether you joined last month's webinar. Right, that's interesting. I'll give you a few more minutes to complete that. We've got about 84% voted so far. 85, 87. Okay, I think most people have probably voted now. So I'll close. But interestingly, nearly half of you haven't listened to one before. So big welcome if you haven't joined one previously. Just to reiterate, because I think we've mentioned this before, that you can listen to the previous 3 months sessions. There are links to them on our functional skills updates page. Again, we'll make sure you get the link to that before we finish. I'll just close this poll. What I'm going to do next is just give you one other poll, and please don't laugh at this one. are you watching this on your own with colleagues down the pub, or I wish I was down the pub? Interestingly, yeah. Reason for
Vote
us
for
to
the
ask,
last one, Paul.
I was going to say there's a healthy number there for that. Yeah.
They're all down the pub.
I was going to say, I mean, there was a serious point to this, which was, I think we're interested. Obviously, we've got a large number of people who've signed up for this event, but it's quite difficult for us to tell whether it's just you signing up as an individual, whether you've got a room full of people all sat together in your team meetings, listen to this. So it looks like there's a number of you that are sort of watching this as a group. But I guess useful for us to know. I guess one question we may ask, and certainly for those who aren't joining the session live, is whether you are watching the sort of recording or listening to the recording of this on your own or with other people. I'll just close this poll while we're talking, or whether you're actually sort of listening to this on your own. I think one of the things that we envisaged, certainly with the recordings, was that there were things that you could use, something that you could use with team meetings or kind of in other sessions. So that was sort of another poll. Just one more question, or two more questions actually, but I'll fire this one up because again, it'd be interesting to see your responses to this as well. That's interesting. Just seeing the responses coming through. About another 80% of you voted, so I'll nearly I'll just close this in a second. But that's an interesting profile at the moment. 6% saying that they know everything, about 2/3 saying enough to understand that you're going to need to change things. 19% not a clue. That's interesting too. And 8% of you are the boss. So that's interesting as well. I think again, serious point to this, which was just about reiterating that actually this is a big change. It's all very well maths and English coordinators and leads kind of knowing what's happening and understanding it, but certainly if there are resourcing changes and other things that people need to be thinking about, I think it was just an opportunity to perhaps think about how you might engage people further up the chain. Part of our thinking behind the readiness guide was to help with that, but there may well be other things that we can help you with over the coming months, and it'd be good to get your thoughts on those if you have any further thoughts about how we could help you in doing that. And then just finally, one more question, and this is really a little bit of a curtain raiser for next month's session. And this is, how do you feel about phonics being part of the sort of the subject content for English? Okay, I think most of you voted now. That's interesting. Good split of responses. I think the modal response, or the plurality, is okay, but actually a healthy number of yay, bring it ons. A few what's phonics, but certainly if you're asking that question, hopefully next month's session with Claire will be useful. 18% of you OMG. Again, I hope Claire might be able to help reassure you a little bit on that. There's one other thing we can obviously say to reassure you, which is that whilst phonics is certainly part of the sort of the focus as far as teaching and learning is concerned, one of the things that we're, I think, pleased to be able to say is that we're not being asked to assess it as part of the qualification. I'll close this poll now and go back to the screen sharing, which should hopefully be back on again. Yeah, you should hopefully have the slide back up again now. Yeah, that's better. I'll just roll on to the next slide, which is really the main focus of today's session, which is to look more specifically at functional skills English and the changes to the subject content. So just at sort of headline level, what do we really know about this? The first thing really is that the content hasn't changed massively. Probably, certainly if you joined us last month for maths, we were talking about more in terms of content being a little bit different from what's gone before. But there are some subtle differences, and it's important not to lose sight of those, and we'll run through those properly in a moment. As with maths, a little bit more emphasis on the underpinning skills as well as the problem solving. There are some tangible things like the word lists that are part of the architecture at entry level, and obviously, as we were mentioning a second ago, the focus on phonics as well within subject content. Another big change, both from an operational point of view and from a sort of focus and emphasis of the assessment, is the move away from allowing dictionaries and spelling and grammar checkers within writing. They will still be permitted within reading, but the one of the big changes, certainly in terms of what we've been used to in the last few years, is that spelling and grammar checkers and dictionaries of any kind will no longer be allowed for the writing component. I'll let Catherine sort of pick up from here and focus a little bit more on the changes and the substance of them.
Okay, thank you, Paul. So looking at the content, as Paul said, it hasn't changed a great deal, but there are some points that you really do need to bear in mind. Entry level, again, as Paul has said, is more about developing the language rather than problem solving that we are used to in previous years, and using phonics, which is more about saying the word, but obviously Claire will sort of go a bit more in depth with that. It is a subtle shift, so try not to worry about it. It's more about testing the skills themselves. The use of image is back at level 1, level 2. So those of you who remember the dreaded key skills, am I allowed to say dreaded, Paul? I'm not sure whether
I don't know about dreaded. They were
that's personal. That's not City and Girls.
Some of us will have fond memories of them, but yes, they were dreaded at times too.
Yes, at times, I think, Paul, at times. So yes, so some of us do remember those. And it's about using an image to extract the information or to interpret the image. So that is back at level 1, level 2. Also, opinions and arguments are now needed to be backed up at level 1, whereas before it was only present at level 2 previously. So over to the next slide, Paul.
Sorry, just...
No, I was just about to say, I'm very impressed. Our technology works very well.
Smoother than I thought it would, yeah.
We seem to be doing really well. So this is just to illustrate what we've actually been saying, really. So underpinning the skills, we'll be looking more explicitly at explicit testing of the knowledge and understanding. Problem solving is still crucial, especially at level 1 and level 2. And just to sort of reinforce, we are getting a lot of people asking for this. Have we got any sample assessments yet? Have we got anything? Because that's what people want. They want to see the actual differences in working with it day to day. As soon as we have them available, we will be sharing them. We are becoming being very, very transparent, and we will have them made available for you as soon as we've got them. As we have mentioned previously about the off-qual conditions, we do encourage you to look at the conditions and requirements, and also familiarise yourself with the subject content and the link. There is links on this presentation for all of these. So going on to the next slide, Paul. Thank you. So looking at the subject content overview, as we've said, entry level is more about grasping the basics, and it's more of a foundation for level 1, level 2. Obviously, we want our learners to be progressing, and level 1, level 2 is more about applying then the skills to a range of familiar and unfamiliar contexts. Okay, over to you, Paul.
Okay, and this kind of leads on a little bit from what we were saying. I think, firstly, important point, and I think we'd always emphasize this, is that each level will subsume the content of the levels below. So anything that's expected at entry 3 would also be expected at level 1 and level 2. That's not new, but I think again it's important to keep that in mind at all times, particularly when you get up to level 1, level 2, where we are to some extent assuming the basics and expecting them to be applied, that will continue to be there. In terms of some other sort of shifts in terms of the expectations, we've touched on the word lists already, but I think obviously what that's emphasizing is that there will be a defined list of words to spell at at each entry level. Don't assume we're going to be testing all 240 odd of those words in every assessment. I think if we did, it would be well, a very long assessment and also a very dry assessment. But one of the things I think we're certainly anticipating being part of this is kind of more of a formal spelling test than the sort of current approach where we tend to test spelling through free writing. So that's likely to be a little bit more formal. Another sort of notable difference in terms of the expectations is that there is now likely to be a presentation or a talk, or rather more than likely to be, there will be, that will be expected at level 1 as well as level 2. There is an upside to that from an operational point of view, particularly if you've got mixture of level 1 and level 2 learners in the same group, in the sense that you may well be able to sort of run those a little bit more smoothly in terms of incorporating the two together. But yes, level 1 learners will need to give a talk as well as take part in a discussion. To sort of obviously help illustrate these changes, we are, and this leads nicely on to the next slide, we are developing, we have just developed a mapping document to compare before and after. A copy of this document will go out with the email after this session, so you'll get a copy of it, and it'll also, as with the maths document that we developed last month, it'll get added to our functional skills updates page. If you've seen the maths document, you'll have a pretty good idea what to expect, in the sense that this follows pretty much the same format. It focuses on the current functional skills subject criteria, the new functional skills subject criteria, and the adult literacy standards. So just really sort of compares them, and anything that's significantly different is flagged in red. So you'll get to see those as well. Again, just a quick reminder again about the special phonics webinar that we've got next month. A note just while I remember this, and actually somebody's just asked this as a question as well. One thing it is important to say, you will actually need to join this session live, because there are, for various reasons, we're not able to record this session. So you will actually, unfortunately, if you're not around on the 11th of December at 3:30, you won't, I'm afraid, be able to actually access the content of it. So it is obviously an emphasis, a reason to obviously sign up for this if you possibly can. We will produce a sort of short summary of kind of the points that Claire makes kind of afterwards, so you will get sort of a flavour of the session. But to get the full impact of what Claire is saying, you will actually unfortunately need to join the session as well. So that's our sort of overview of English and the changes. Just sort of run on now, which is just again as a little bit of a reminder to say that we're actually doing a little bit of work to review the range of digital learning resources that we have for our whole full range of maths and English qualifications. A number of you will probably be already familiar with the e-functional skills resource that we worked jointly with HODA to produce, and it sits on their dynamic learning platform. We've got some work going on at the moment to review that content, certainly in light of the changes, and that will obviously result in a slightly reworked and repurposed version of that document, or certainly a slightly reworked version of those resources, and that will obviously come into play kind of alongside the new qualifications. The other thing we're doing is looking again at the Maths and English e-toolkit that again has been around for a number of years, is less narrowly focused around functional skills, but is nevertheless always been designed with functional skills in mind as one of the crucial qualifications that would be worked on. We're going to probably in the spring run a more detailed session on how we're planning to change those, but in the meantime, just to sort of give you a bit of a heads up, the general sort of direction of travel for what we're doing here is moving towards having a more generalized maths and English bank of resources, but within that much clearer signposting as to how that content relates to functional skills, but also how that content relates to GCSE. So there's opportunities to kind of use it with different settings and with different learners, regardless of the qualifications that they happen to be working towards. So just to sort of make you aware of those, The other big change or other thing to be aware of is that we are now starting to have a single go-to point for all of our Maths and English events. You can see the link at the bottom of this page, bit.ly/CG Maths English events. I think we're very aware that our standard events calendar and trying to search for events directly through Eventbrite can be a slightly frustrating experience. So that shortcut link, again, will make that more widely available to you. Will be a quick way of getting to sort of see anything that we've got that's Maths and English focused over the next few months. If you go into there at the moment, all you'll see are these webinars and the phonics webinar, but certainly you'll get to see other things added to that in due course. I'll let Catherine sort of pick up from here.
Right, thank you, Paul. So, yeah, another plug. Sorry.
Sorry. No.
We're trying
say
to
it once, say it again. Say it again. Yeah.
We're jumping up and down rather than people saying you never told us. Raise awareness really for next month's webinar. You have to listen to it live, and you will need to specifically sign up for this webinar. You will get the link emailed out to you with the slides to this presentation, but also your colleagues can also sign up to the webinar via the shortcut on the Eventbrite. As Paul said, it can be a bit of a nightmare to find. So on the previous slides, you do have the shortcut to that, so your colleagues you can email that out to them. So just to make it a little bit easier. And again, if you have any questions, you can use the usual website, the FS Reform at cityandgirls.com, and also give us feedback as well if you're not listening live. These polls that Paul does are absolutely brilliant, and we get a flavour of what, who's listening. We want to know, are you the boss, are you not the boss, who knows what about the new functional skills reform, because it's quite alarming that a lot of people still are not aware of it. So it's about raising that awareness for everybody. It just makes everybody's life a lot easier when it comes to teaching in September 2019. I think I might have plugged that enough now, Paul. On to the next slide.
Hopefully that's message that's got through.
Let's all over LinkedIn and Twitter as well, shall we?
Yes, yeah, and of course, always if you are using social media, any social media platform, we kind of put that Fun Skills 2019 hashtag out there, slightly light-heartedly, but I think it is starting to gain a bit of traction. And I have seen one or two other people engaged in the reform program starting to use it as well as ourselves. So hopefully it'll stick. Just to roll on.
Okay, thank you. So we do have some CPD sessions planned to support the English delivery. Just to make you aware, they are separate to the functional skills reform, and they're actually related to the teaching of English, regardless what qualifications the learners might be doing. Please note that these are chargeable sessions, but you can book using the link shortcut here, because we still there is a fast turnout of staff sometimes, and people change subjects. So, and obviously with the new reform coming in, it's about forearming tutors as well, because obviously we don't want people to panic. So we've got these CPD sessions available for you. So on to the next slide, please, Paul. It's working ever so well. I'm very impressed.
This is almost too well, isn't
it? All at the last two now. No, it won't. It won't. Positive thinking. So if you are signed up to the webinars, you should get your email reminder. And again, another little plug, do sign up for the December one separately. We also have our email alerts. Please make sure you signed up to those and encourage others to sign up to them as well. And lots of information and events coming out. Because as I said, so coming soon, we've got our FAQs, our Maths and English blog, and our networks and launch events. And this is where you can actually start to get that information. Paul and I don't intend to go home all summer, do we, Paul? We are going to start a roadshow, I think, probably February onwards, and that's it. We'll just live
living out the suitcase, won't we? Yeah.
We'll just live out of the suitcase, so the webinars might be a little bit tiresome when we get to them. We'll be very weary, should I say, but hey ho. But we will be out there, and we're going to have a lot of events going on. Now over to you then, Paul.
Okay, I'll just to sort of finish up in terms of the formal the formal content. Again, usual contact details here. If you're wanting to sort of find the functional skills updates page, the quickest way of getting to it, other than follow that direct link, is to go to sittinggirls.com/maths and English, and then there are links through to functional skills, and from that to the updates. We've mentioned the FS Reform email address. By all means, use that if you want to sort of ask us a specific question outside of these sessions. If you wanted to know more about the digital stuff that I was talking about a second ago, another email address just to note, digitalsales@sittinggirls.com. Team who look after that stuff are based in Wakefield. What they can do quite regularly, or quite easily rather, is set up a remote demonstration so they can kind of walk you through exactly what's there. The other thing to say is that we are promoting these events through LinkedIn, as well as obviously tweeting about them. So if you're on there, obviously give us a shout as well. But just obviously that's it in terms of our sort of content. Just having a quick glance through the questions that we've had through, and thank you for those of you that have asked those. I'll just quickly rattle through these. I think I answered one of them, which was about the webinar being or the next month's webinar being live. Hopefully we've covered that. One question: do we know if there will still be a requirement for learners to complete persuasive writing at level 1? I think the answer to that is broadly yes. That won't go away. Actually, writing, there isn't a huge difference from what we've been used to. I think we're still and again, obviously this is obviously subject to confirmation, but I would still envisage it being broadly similar in the sense of being 2 documents for 2 distinct purposes, and certainly persuasiveness is going to be one of the skills that we expect learners to show. I think it is worth saying, and this has certainly come up, not necessarily here, but as an aside, one of the things that is obviously as a consequence of taking away spelling and grammar checkers is that it's likely that we'll probably have to slightly re-envisage how we award marks for SPAG accuracy. The way the content and the regulatory conditions are framed, we're still looking at SPAG being somewhere in the region of 40% of the total marks, but I guess we are probably going to need to be a little bit more forgiving of mistakes if learners haven't got dictionaries and spell checkers to hand. Obviously what that means in terms of raw marks and pass marks, etc., I think we're a long way from settling those things, but I think it will obviously we'll obviously need to take account of that as we get to that point. One other question was the session just focusing on English, and I think the answer to that is yes, but by all means, we did a similar session to this last month that looked at more closely at maths, so you're welcome to kind of listen back to the recording of that. Another interesting question, which was about spiky profiling. Our understanding, and again this is subject to sort of things being absolutely confirmed, is that spiky profiling probably won't exist in the new structure. I think Ofqual are wanting all 3 to be at the same level. I mean, spiky profiling at the moment has always been around not being able to achieve lower than the required level, so obviously having to be at or above the standard in all 3. Our understanding at the moment is they probably will expect us to actually ensure achievement at all 3, which could be tricky for us, I suspect, because there will be learners potentially who've achieved at a higher level and then drop back. But we'll need to, and certainly one of the things I know that we will have to work through as part of that is making sure that we are making that as painless as possible. Just to drag along from those a little bit more. The timing for the 11th, that's a good point. Just to reiterate, that 15:30, so 3:30 again, our usual start time for these sessions. And again, we envisage that running for about an hour or so. When will the new assessments come into play? When will the old or new? We'll just to quickly reiterate where we are with that. The current functional skills qualifications will close to new registrations on the 31st of August 2019. So that will be the last date on which it's possible to register anybody new for the old qualifications. We envisage probably another year or so after that before they're finally switched off. The new qualifications will then go live for first teaching in September. So anybody starting at that point will need to be working to the new, but they'll have a period of time before the old ones kind of go are withdrawn. Sample papers, I think, just to reiterate kind of what we were saying before, which is really that will hinge on when we've got that sort of green light from Ofqual, that they're happy with what we're proposing. As I said, that's a sort of really intense piece of work that we're, like all awarding organisations, engaged with at the moment. I think our sort of hunch is that that's likely to be sort of settled around January, February time. But again, I think I'd be cautious about putting a firm date on that because it's not entirely within our hands. All I will say is that when we have got that clarity, there will be sample papers out there very quickly, and we will be running some launch events, so you will get a good understanding. Another question, would you know if digital learning is available on the VC and used in secure environments, or if there are any plans? Again, absolutely part of our thinking at the moment. The current Maths and English toolkit is available. Certainly, just for those who aren't used to a prison environment, offender learning, VC is the virtual campus, the secure internet system that's used often in prison environments. So, but yes, that content is currently available. Right. Another question: would learners still be AV? Certain what that's there previously. And then another question: could you provide a link to the previous webinars? And that's certainly there on the updates page. Again, what we will want to be to do next is focus on obviously the updates page, and we'll make sure that you get a link to that. Another comment, and I think it's probably useful, probably actually an important point actually to make, which was, I'm not sure why we would want to be lenient with SPAG at level 1, level 2. I should emphasize, I think probably ought to be clarified what I was saying. I think we are expecting people to be able to use spelling and grammar. I think what I was probably saying more is that actually where learners are having to spell accurately in a piece of free writing, that you might be less exacting of that standard. Certainly, we will want to test SPAG accurately at that level 1 and level 2, and we will need to obviously have a standard. But I think what we've probably also got to do is take account of the focus that's there at the moment, which is making sure that learners aren't relying overly on the technology, that they've got some of those underpinning skills, but equally that we are asking them to produce 2 texts under quite tight time constraints. So I think there is an acceptance that perfection in those situations is going to be quite difficult to achieve. When I said all 3, I think that was probably talking about the 3 areas of English. So yes, all 3 areas would probably have to be at the same level. Certainly, we're not expecting, I don't think anybody's expecting English, maths and ICT to all have to be achieved at the same level. They are still separate qualifications. Another question: will learners still be able to use computers to produce their written work? There's no, although we're not going, they won't be allowed to use a dictionary. There's no stipulation that they have to handwrite their responses. So that will need a little bit of practical working through, because obviously use normal Microsoft Word at the moment to create a document, the spell checkers and everything are there. So if people are typing their work, they will need to have spell checkers, etc., switched off. But there's no inherent reason why they couldn't. How soon after 1st of September will the new live assessments be available? I think the key question there is as soon as we can have them up and running. I think we touched on this a little bit during last month's session, because I think the slight quandary that we have is that when we introduce brand new assessments, one of the things that we have to do initially is ensure that we've got the pass mark absolutely away in the right place. And the only way that we realistically can do that is have that kind of actually set up in through reviewing some actual students' work. So one of the things that we will probably do is launch the new assessments quite soon after, or quite early into the next academic year, but have possibly a slightly extended period before we start releasing results. I think we're very conscious that we need to work that through, and certainly any large providers, we will liaise closely with you around understanding your your pipeline and your plans and making sure that we're not coming through. What I think obviously is useful to have is if we are launching that we have enough candidates in the system that we can start pushing results out quite quickly. I suppose the other question, which was why are we moving away from spelling and grammar checkers? And I think that's an interesting question. It perhaps ties in with a view that the government had about spelling and grammar checkers. It also would follow back without rehearsing the whole history of the reform programme. It perhaps touches to some of the conversations that employers were having. Another question, which was about the maths past webinar content. There's a link to that on the functional skills updates page, so you will have that available there. This session is being recorded, so we will send out a link to this session, and again it'll be added to the be added to the last session. Guided learning hours, another question. They are likely to change. We don't know for certain to what extent. The DfE has been consulting on that at the moment. Our understanding possibly is that they will increase slightly from the current 45, but probably not massively so. I think the government is keen to ensure that these aren't seen as kind of as big as GCSE in size, but probably recognising with there being more content that they may need to add some more. Another question, which was about the workbooks for the certificate qualifications. Probably important to say that our English skills, our maths skills qualifications, the 3847 suite, if anyone's aware of those, no immediate plan to change those, so they are staying as they are for the foreseeable future. Obviously, I suspect we may, in time, want to review those, particularly if there are broader changes to the maths and English landscape. But at the moment, there's no plan to change those. I think that's all of the questions that we've had through. By all means, obviously, if you haven't managed to answer a question directly here, look out for it. We are storing each of these questions, and we are adding to our own sort of ever-growing list of FAQs. So we will. The only reason why we haven't put that out yet is that we are trying to sort of make sure that has got everything that's possibly in there. But certainly one of the things that we're focusing on is trying to launch that in the near future. I think probably just remains for us to say thank you again for joining us this afternoon, or joining us whenever you're joining us if you're listening back to the recording. Great to have some good questions, obviously some good engagement, and it'd be good to see, obviously, as we go over the next few months, to see which comes coming through. Just to reiterate, just one other question's come through, which was to say that the English skills and the math skills qualifications, they're separate to our functional skills qualifications, but a number of you may well be aware of them or use them as a way of developing learners' progression towards functional skills. There's no plan to change those qualifications, only functional skills itself that will be changing at this stage. So sorry, just to quickly answer those questions. I'll go back to our sort of closing points. Just to obviously thank you again for your attendance. Catherine, you're still there?
I am still here, yeah. A big thank you, and thank you for joining in the polls as well. It really does help us to sort of give an idea, who is listening as well.
And also who isn't listening as well, which is useful as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Who we need to make sure that we are engaging with.
Yeah. Did anybody actually say they were down the pub poll at all?
I think there were a few I wish I was, but
right.
and I might join them. Might be joining them in that shortly. Anyway, but thanks again, everybody. I'll draw today's session to a close. Obviously, if you don't have a chance to pose a question or something that comes to mind, by all means use the FS Reform email address. But that probably just remains for us to say thank you. And I'll, if I can work out how to close this, here we go. Yeah, we'll do that now.